This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Connie Chung.
Good evening. House Republicans are savoring the biggest victory yet of their first 100 days in power. The passage last night of a proposed constitutional amendment that would mandate a balanced federal budget. As Chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer reports, it's the latest sign that the balance of power has shifted to the right.
When you win the big ones, the entourage grows, so Speaker Gingrich was mobbed everywhere he went, and at every stop he said passing the balanced budget amendment was just the beginning.
When I said revolution, I meant revolution. When I said real change, I meant real change. The American people have made, prior to November 8th, we couldn't pass a balanced budget amendment. Last night it got 300 votes.
And 72 of those votes came from Democrats. Gingrich calls them reform Democrats now. And as if to underline how sentiment is turning right, even the House Democrats' leader who voted against the amendment said maybe the Constitution should at least reflect a desire to balance the budget.
So I've come to the conclusion that it might be a good idea to put into the Constitution, which is a very serious act, that's why it's so hard to do, an admonition that the budget ought to be balanced.
The big Republican day was interrupted by a sideshow that developed over a radio interview given by Dick Armey, Gingrich's top lieutenant. Armey seemed to use a slur describing Democrat Barney Frank, who is openly gay.
I like peace and quiet, and I don't need to listen to Barney Frank haranguing in my ear.
Armey called it an unintended mispronunciation and quickly apologized, but Democrats rushed to defend Frank.
These are words of hate.
Today it's Barney Frank's, tomorrow it could be me.
Mr. Armey is too damn careless with his mouth.
Frank himself concluded it was unintended, but
I accept the fact that it was not on the tip of his tongue, but as I said, I'm afraid this is evidence that it was in the back of his mind.
Then, as Frank watched, a furious Armey took the House floor and blamed it on the press.
I take strong exception to the airing of the tape and even the transcribing of a stumbled word as if it were an intentional personal attack.
As weird as it all got, it didn't change the fact that House Republicans had made good on their first promise and passed the balanced budget amendment. Now it goes to the Senate. They'll have a much harder time there. Bob Schieffer, CBS News at the Capitol.
New figures from the government today show just how rapidly the economy was growing last year. In the final quarter, the gross domestic product surged ahead at an annual rate of 4.5% as Americans went on a buying spree. For the year, the GDP grew 4%, the strongest showing in 10 years. The Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates again next week to try to slow the economy down and reduce the risk of inflation. Dan.
Thanks, Connie. President Clinton met with people today who know what it's like to be on the receiving end of public help. He was warming up for a big meeting on welfare this weekend. The president is willing to compromise with majority Republicans on cutting the annual $22 billion welfare bill, but not, he says, at any cost. More from White House correspondent Rita Braver.
Trying to seize leadership on the controversial subject of welfare, President Clinton today hosted current and former welfare mothers as he prepares for tomorrow's welfare summit with members of Congress, governors, and mayors. Mr. Clinton is in the midst of a difficult balancing act. He wants to forge bipartisan agreement and still demonstrate that Republicans want cuts that are too drastic.
What worries you about some of the welfare remedies that are being proposed by Republicans in Congress?
Well, some of them seem to say that we should cut people off of assistance without regard to what will happen to their children and without regard to whether they will have an opportunity to get the skills they need to move into the workforce.
In contrast to the president, House Republicans would deny cash benefits to unwed mothers under 18 and would let states cut off all benefits after 2 years to most welfare recipients, even if they can't find work.
At some point, we've got to say, okay,